My stepdad pushed me at the Christmas table. This seat belongs to my real daughter. Get out. I fell to the ground in front of the whole family. But what he didn't know was that very night I would change his life forever. When he woke up the next morning, true story, she had 47 missed calls. The hardwood floor was cold against my palms. I stayed there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the intricate pattern of the Persian rug that had broken my fall. Around me, 18 family members sat frozen in various states of shock, their champagne glasses suspended midair, their mouths forming perfect circles of disbelief. Nobody moved to help me up. Keith, what on earth? My mother's voice cracked. She knows what she did. Patricia. My stepdad said, his voice steady and cold as he adjusted his designer tie. That seat was reserved for Brianna. I made it clear this morning. Brianna, his 23-year-old daughter, from his first marriage, who had arrived 30 minutes late to Christmas dinner, wearing a smirk that told me she'd orchestrated this entire humiliation, stood in the doorway. Now her manicured nails wrapped around an expensive handbag, watching me sprawl on the floor with barely concealed satisfaction. I pushed myself up slowly, my tailbone screaming in protest. At 28 years old, I'd survived worse than public humiliation. I'd survived Keith Morrison for the past 12 years, ever since he'd married my mother, and systematically worked to erase me from what remained of our family. My younger brother Timothy sat at the far end of the table, his face red with suppressed rage, but I caught his eye and shook my head slightly. Not worth it. Not here. Stacy, are you okay? Mom whispered, but she didn't stand. I forced a small nod. I'm going to step outside for some air, I said quietly, smoothing down my burgundy dress that Mom had complimented just hours earlier, back when this evening held promise. Take your time, sweetheart, she whispered again, but she stayed seated. She never stood up for me when it mattered. Keith had trained her well over the years, convinced her that his money and status were worth any sacrifice, even her daughter's dignity. I grabbed my coat and walked through the sprawling Morrison estate, past the decorator-perfect rooms with their 20-foot ceilings and original oil paintings. Keith had made his fortune in commercial real estate development, transforming abandoned warehouses into luxury condominiums across the Pacific Northwest. He loved reminding people of his success, especially me, especially when he wanted to highlight everything my late father had failed to provide. The December air bit into my skin as I stepped onto the stone patio. The Seattle skyline glittered in the distance, indifferent to my humiliation. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and opened my messages. There were 3 texts from my best friend Allison, who I had confided in, about Keith's escalating hostility over the past few months. Then I saw the notification I'd been waiting for. An email from Wesley Garrett, the private investigator I'd hired 6 weeks ago. Subject line: final report. Morrison investigation. My finger hovered over the screen. Once I opened this, there would be no going back. Whatever Wesley had found would either vindicate my suspicions or prove I'd wasted $3,000 on paranoid delusions. I opened it. The first attachment was a photograph Keith Morrison standing outside a downtown Seattle hotel, his hand on the small of a woman's back. The woman wasn't my mother. The timestamp showed last Tuesday, the same night he told Mom he had a business dinner with potential investors. I scrolled. More photographs. Keith entering a condominium in Belltown. Keith and the same woman at a restaurant in Pioneer Square. Bank statements showing regular cash withdrawals of $2,500 every 2 weeks for the past 8 months. Credit card receipts for jewelry, luxury hotels, expensive dinners. A paper trail of betrayal so extensive it would make a prosecutor weep with joy. But the final document was the masterpiece. Wesley had traced the woman's identity through property records. Her name was Denise Carlson, and she lived in one of the luxury condos Keith's company had developed 3 years ago. The condo she lived in, Unit 2847. The owner on record, a Shell LLC that Wesley had connected back to Keith through corporate filings and tax documents. Keith had bought his mistress a $400,000 condominium using money that legally belonged to the family trust. The trust my mother had contributed to substantially when they married, combining her inheritance from my father's life insurance with Keith's assets under the advice of his attorney. The trust that was supposed to ensure Timothy and I would have something when Mom passed, no matter what happened to the marriage. I'd suspected Keith was cheating for months, the late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the sudden interest in expensive cologne. But I'd never imagined he'd be stupid enough to steal from the family trust to finance his affair. My hand steadied as I forwarded the email to myself 3 more times, then to my personal cloud storage. I took screenshots of every document. Then I opened my contacts and found the number for Julian Westbrook, a divorce attorney, whose work I'd admired during a case involving one of my clients at the marketing firm where I worked. It was 900 on Christmas night, but I texted anyway. Need to discuss urgent family matter. Client is ready to proceed. Evidence is substantial. Can we meet tomorrow? The response came faster than I expected. Boxing Day consultation. 10 Tuesday a.m. My office. Bring everything. I stood there on the patio for another 15 minutes, letting the cold seep into my bones, letting my anger crystallize into something harder and more useful than rage. Keith Morrison had pushed me to the ground in front of our entire extended family. He humiliated me because I dared to sit in a chair at the table in a house my mother's money had helped furnish. What he didn't know was that I'd been documenting his behavior for months. The dismissive comments about my career, the way he'd forgotten to include me in family photos, the time he told Timothy that real success meant becoming someone like him, not struggling in creative fields like your sister Stacy. Every slight, every insult, every moment of casual cruelty had built toward this. I walked back inside through the side entrance, avoiding the dining room entirely. Upstairs in my childhood bedroom, which Keith had reluctantly allowed Mom to keep for appearances, I pulled out my laptop and began organizing files. I created a secure folder with copies of everything Wesley had sent me. Then I started drafting an email to my mother, something she'd receive tomorrow morning, while Keith slept off his Christmas champagne. The email included a brief explanation and a link to view all the evidence in my cloud storage. I wrote, "Mom, I need you to read this before you talk to Keith tomorrow. What I'm about to share will hurt, but you deserve to know the truth about where your money has been going and who your husband really is. I've scheduled a consultation with a divorce attorney for you at 2 p.m. tomorrow if you want it. The choice is yours, but you need to see this. I love you. Please call me when you're ready." My finger rested on the send button. I could hear voices downstairs the dinner party continuing without me. Brianna's high-pitched laugh carrying through the vents. Keith would be holding court, telling stories about his latest development project, basking in admiration from cousins and uncles, who saw him as the family success story. I pressed send. The email scheduled itself for 7 in the morning. Then I pulled out another document. Wesley had prepared a detailed memo summarizing evidence of financial misconduct related to the family trust. This one was addressed to Harrison Chen, the attorney, who'd helped Mom set up the trust 12 years ago. Harrison was meticulous about fiduciary responsibility, and if he saw evidence that Keith had misappropriated trust funds, he'd be legally obligated to investigate. That email also went into the scheduled folder. 8 a.m., delivery. The third email went to Timothy at his college address, explaining everything and telling him not to come home until I gave him the all clear. My baby brother had suffered under Keith's contempt for years, constantly compared to Brianna, and found wanting. He deserved to know the truth, but he didn't need to be present for the explosion. Finally, I drafted a letter to Brianna herself. Nothing accusatory, nothing that could be used against me later. Just a simple note. Your father's choices are going to impact your trust fund. You might want to talk to your own lawyer about protecting your interests. What's coming isn't about you, but you'll be affected. Consider this a courtesy warning. I didn't send that one immediately. Let her enjoy her Christmas victory a little longer. Downstairs, I could hear the party winding down car doors, slamming goodbyes, echoing through the foyer. I stayed in my room watching the Seattle city lights through the window, feeling something I hadn't felt in years around Keith. Power. Around midnight, I heard my mother's footsteps pause outside my door. A soft knock. "Sweetheart, are you awake?" I opened the door. Mom stood there in her elegant Christmas dress, her makeup slightly smudged, looking older than her 52 years. The past decade had worn on her, though she'd never admit it. "I'm so sorry about what happened," she whispered. "Keith had too much to drink. He didn't mean—" "Yes, he did," I said, my voice calm. "He meant every bit of it. But that's okay, Mom. Everything's going to be okay now." She studied my face, confused by my composure. "What do you mean?" "Check your email tomorrow morning. 7 a.m. Promise me you'll read it before you talk to Keith." Her eyes widened with fear. "Stacy, what have you done?" "Nothing yet, but tomorrow things are going to change. You'll understand everything then." I hugged her, breathing in her familiar perfume. "I love you. Get some sleep." She pulled back, searching my eyes for clues, but I kept my expression neutral. After a moment, she nodded uncertainly and retreated down the hallway to the master bedroom. She shared with the man who was about to lose everything. I set my alarm for 6:30 and climbed into bed fully clothed. Sleep seemed impossible, but exhaustion pulled me under within minutes. My phone woke me at 6:30 sharp. Gray morning light filtered through the curtains. Downstairs, the house was silent. I checked my email dashboard. All 3 messages were queued and ready to deploy on schedule. I thought about taking a shower, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but my body felt electric with anticipation. Instead, I made coffee in the small Keurig I kept in my room, another relic from my teenage years, when I'd learned to be self-sufficient within Keith's domain. The coffee tasted bitter, or maybe that was just the adrenaline coating my tongue. It is 7:45. 15 minutes until Mom would see everything. I wondered if she was already awake, if she sensed something was coming. She'd always had good intuition back before Keith had convinced her to doubt herself. I pulled up Wesley Garrett's contact information on my phone. He'd included a note at the bottom of his final report that I'd overlooked last night in my rush to process everything. Additional surveillance available if needed for divorce proceedings. Also have contacts for asset protection attorneys and forensic accountants. You did the right thing hiring me. This guy's been sloppy for months, almost like he wanted to get caught. People like him always think they're untouchable until they're not. Wesley was right. Keith had gotten arrogant. The affair with Denise had started carefully, I imagined, but over time he'd stopped covering his tracks as thoroughly. The cash withdrawals had become predictable. The hotel visits fell into a pattern. He'd probably convinced himself that Mom would never question him, that his authority in the household was so absolute that scrutiny was impossible. He'd forgotten about me. Or more accurately, he'd never considered me a threat to begin with. At 7 a.m. exactly, the first message sent to my mother. I watched the confirmation appear on my screen, felt my heart rate spike. There was no taking it back now. In her bedroom down the hall, Mom's phone would be buzzing with a notification. She was an early riser, always had been. She'd see it within minutes. I counted seconds in my head. 1 minute passed, 2 minutes, 3. At 7:04, I heard a sound from the master bedroom. Not a scream, but something worse. A low, wounded noise that made my chest constrict with sympathetic pain. I'd known this would hurt her. I'd prepared myself for her anger, possibly directed at me, for my role in exposing the truth, but I hadn't quite prepared myself for the sound of my mother's heart breaking through 2 walls and a closed door. Footsteps, quick, unsteady, the sound of the master bathroom door closing. Water running. I imagined her splashing her face, trying to compose herself, reading through the documents with shaking hands. The photographs of Keith with another woman. The bank statements showing systematic theft. The property records proving premeditated deception. At 8 a.m., Harrison Chen received his documentation. At 8:15, I received a text from Timothy. Just read your email. Holy crap. Stay safe. I'm here if you need me. I typed back. Stay at school. This is going to get messy. I'll keep you updated on everything. Mom's going to need time to process. His response was immediate. Tell Mom I love her. Tell her she deserves better than him. Always did. At 8:43, my phone rang. Mom! Her voice was barely audible. Is this real, Stacy? Tell me this isn't real. Every document is verified. Wesley Garrett is a licensed private investigator with 15 years of experience. Harrison Chen will confirm the financial irregularities. I'm so sorry, Mom. I heard her breath hitch, then silence. Then a sound I'd never heard from my mother. Pure, unfiltered rage. Where are you right now? In my room. I'm leaving soon to meet with Julian Westbrook, the attorney. He's expecting us at 10 Hujri if you want to come. The consultation is already paid for. I'll be ready in 30 minutes. The line went dead. I dressed quickly in a navy suit I brought specifically for this purpose. Professional, serious, unimpeachable. I pulled my hair back, applied minimal makeup, and packed my laptop bag with printed copies of every document Wesley had provided. Downstairs, I could hear voices rising, Keith's sharp tone, defensive and angry. Mom's voice higher-pitched, demanding answers. I stayed in my room, giving them space to have whatever conversation they needed to have without me. At 8:50, there was pounding on my door. Keith's voice, no longer smooth and controlled. Open this door right now. What lies have you been telling your mother? I didn't respond. I'd anticipated this. My door had a lock I'd installed myself 3 years ago, after Keith had a habit of entering my room without permission when I visited. I know you're in there. This is my house. Open this door or I'll break it down. Keith, stop. Mom's voice steel underneath the pain. She's given me evidence, documentation, bank statements, photographs. Is Denise Carlson living in Unit 2847 of the Belltown Project? Silence. Answer me, Keith. Patricia, let me explain. This isn't what it looks like. Stacy has twisted everything to make me look. Did you buy that condominium using money from our family trust? More silence. Get away from my daughter's door. We're leaving in 20 minutes. Don't try to stop us. I heard footsteps retreating. Keith's voice smaller now. Where are you going? To see an attorney, Mom replied. to figure out how to protect what's mine from what you've stolen. I waited another 10 minutes before emerging. Keith stood at the end of the hallway, his face gray, his expensive Christmas sweater rumpled. He looked at me with something between hatred and fear. "You planned this," he said. "You've been planning this. You pushed me to the ground in front of 18 people because I sat in a chair. Did you think there would be no consequences?" His jaw clenched. "Everything I've built, this family, this life, you built it on lies. You built it on my mother's money and her trust. You built it while treating her children like inconvenient reminders of her past." I walked past him toward the stairs. "You should call your lawyer, Keith. You're going to need one." Mom was waiting by the front door, her designer purse clutched in white-knuckled hands, her eyes red but dry. She'd changed into a sharp gray pantsuit that made her look like the corporate attorney she'd been before she married Keith, and he convinced her to retire early. We drove to Julian Westbrook's office in silence. The Seattle streets were quiet, most people still at home with family, enjoying the laziness of Boxing Day. Julian's office was in a sleek downtown building with glass walls and expensive modern art in the lobby. Julian himself was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that radiated competent intensity. He spent 2 hours reviewing every document I brought, asking precise questions, taking meticulous notes. "Mrs. Morrison," he finally said, "this is one of the most well-documented cases of financial infidelity and trust misappropriation I've seen in my career. With this evidence, we can pursue criminal charges in addition to divorce proceedings." Mom's voice was steady. "I want him to have nothing. Everything he took, everything he stole, I want it back. We'll need to act quickly before he can move assets. I'll file for an emergency restraining order on all joint accounts and a freeze on trust disbursements. We'll also need to coordinate with the trust attorney." He checked his notes. "Harrison Chen." "Harrison will cooperate," I said. "He takes fiduciary duty very seriously." Julian nodded. "Then we begin immediately. Mrs. Morrison, I need you to sign these initial documents. We'll file the divorce petition this afternoon. Given the evidence of asset dissipation, the judge will likely grant temporary orders in your favor within 48 hours. Mom's hand trembled as she signed the first document, then steadied with each subsequent signature. I recognized the transformation happening in real time. She was stepping back into the woman she'd been before Keith, decisive, clear-minded, unafraid of confrontation. 12 years of his conditioning were beginning to crack. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out another folder I'd prepared. "Keith's been telling people for years that his business success is entirely self-made. But I found the articles of incorporation for his first major development project. Mom, you were listed as a primary investor. $250,000. September 2014. Julian's eyebrows rose. "Do you have the investment agreement?" "I have a copy. The original should be in the safe deposit box at First National Bank, the one Keith and Mom share." I slid the document across the table. "The agreement specifies that Mom would receive 30% of net profits from the Riverside Luxury Apartments project. That building has been generating rental income for 9 years now." Julian turned to Mom. "Have you received profit distributions, Mrs. Morrison?" Mom shook her head slowly, her face pale. "Keith said the building was underperforming. He said we were lucky to break even after maintenance costs and property management fees." Julian made several sharp notes. "We'll need to subpoena the financial records for that property. If he's been collecting profits without distributing your contractual share, that's another form of fraud." He looked up at me with something like respect. "You've been thorough." "I had a good teacher," I said, thinking of my father. He'd been a CPA before his death, meticulous about documentation and financial records. Some of my earliest memories were of him explaining compound interest and tax law at the dinner table, making it into stories I could understand. My dad always said that numbers don't lie. People do. You just have to know how to read between the lines. Mom's eyes filled with tears. "He would have been so proud of how you handled this, Stacy." We spent another hour on paperwork and strategy. Julian explained that Keith would be served with divorce papers and a court summons by tomorrow morning at the latest. The trust investigation would proceed in parallel, which could take weeks, but would likely result in Keith being removed as a trustee and potentially facing civil penalties for misappropriation. "What about his company?" Mom asked. "The real estate development firm." "That's separate property from before the marriage," Julian said. "Correct?" "Mostly," Mom said. "But I invested a substantial amount in 2 of his projects. My attorney at the time said it would be partnership income." Julian made more notes. We'll need to examine those investment agreements. If your capital was instrumental to those projects' success, you may have claims on the profits. I'll need copies of all investment documents. By the time we left Julian's office, it was after 1:00 in the afternoon. My phone had been vibrating constantly throughout the meeting. 31. Missed calls from Keith. 14. Text messages ranging from apologetic to threatening. 8 calls from Brianna. 6 messages from various family members who'd apparently heard something was happening. 2 calls from numbers I didn't recognize. And 1 call from Harrison Chen, Mom's trust attorney. Mom called him back from the car. I could hear his voice through the speaker, calm but concerned. Patricia, I've reviewed the documents that were sent to me this morning. This is serious. I'm obligated to report this to the other trustees immediately. I've already filed a formal complaint with the State Bar regarding Keith's potential misuse of trust assets. There will be an investigation. How long will that take? Mom asked. Several weeks, possibly months. But in the interim, I'm freezing all trust disbursements pending resolution. Keith will not be able to access any trust funds as of today. I'm also recommending we bring in a forensic accountant to trace all trust transactions for the past 5 years. Mom closed her eyes. Do whatever you need to do, Harrison. I should have asked questions sooner. You trusted your husband. That's not a failing. I'll keep you updated on every development. We drove back to the Morrison estate to collect Mom's essential belongings. I'd advised her not to stay in the house while the divorce was pending, and Julian had agreed. Too much opportunity for confrontation or worse, evidence tampering. Keith's car was in the driveway when we arrived. Mom's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I'll come in with you, I said. He won't hurt me, Mom whispered. Keith's many things, but he's never been violent. He pushed me to the ground last night. Mom flinched. That was different. He was drunk, and Brianna was pushing his buttons about seating arrangements. He's never touched me until yesterday. He'd never touched me either, I said quietly. I'm coming in. We entered together through the front door. The house felt different in daylight, less grand, and more like what it was, a monument to one man's ego. Keith emerged from his study looking haggard, like he had aged a decade overnight. Patricia, please, we need to talk about this reasonably. Your daughter has poisoned you against me with half-truths, and I saw the photographs, Keith, Mom said. I saw the bank statements. I saw the property records. Denise Carlson, Unit 2847. $400,000 from our family trust. He sagged against the doorframe. It was a mistake, an investment that got complicated. I can explain if you'll just explain how you've been sleeping with her for 8 months. Explain how you've been stealing from our children's inheritance to pay for your affair. Explain how you humiliated my daughter. Stacy at Christmas dinner. Mom's voice rose with each question. I've spent 12 years making excuses for you. 12 years. Letting you diminish my children because I convinced myself you loved me, but you don't love anyone except yourself. That's not true. I gave you everything. This house, this lifestyle. You gave me isolation. You gave me a pretty prison where I had to watch you systematically destroy my relationship with my own daughter. You gave me lies. She moved past him toward the stairs. I'm collecting my things. Don't follow me. I stayed in the foyer with Keith while Mom went upstairs. He looked at me with undisguised venom. This is what you wanted, to destroy our family, to take your mother away from everything we built together. You destroyed your own family when you decided my mother's money was yours to spend on another woman. You destroyed it when you pushed me to the ground because your daughter wanted my chair. You destroyed it long before I hired a private investigator. I could have given you everything, he snapped. A position in my company, introductions to the right people, opportunities you'll never have working at that mediocre marketing firm. But you were always so resentful, Stacy, so convinced I was the enemy. You made yourself my enemy when you erased my father's pictures from this house, when you told my mother that keeping his memory alive was unhealthy, when you treated Timothy like a disappointment because he wanted to study art instead of business. You never wanted a family, Keith. You wanted an audience. He opened his mouth to respond, but Mom appeared at the top of the stairs with 2 large suitcases. I hurried up to help her, and together we carried them down and out to her car. Keith followed us to the driveway but didn't try to stop us. Where are you going? He called out. Somewhere you're not, Mom replied. You'll be served with divorce papers tomorrow. Don't contact me directly. All communication goes through my attorney. Patricia, you're making a mistake, Keith pleaded. We can work through this. Counseling, therapy, whatever you need. Mom turned to face him one last time. The only mistake I made was believing you when you said you'd love my children as your own. Goodbye, Keith. We drove away with Keith standing alone in the circular driveway of the house that was about to become a contested asset in a very ugly divorce. Mom stayed at my apartment that night. It was smaller than her walk-in closet at Keith's estate, but it was mine and it was safe. We ordered Chinese food and sat on my secondhand couch, processing the earthquake that had just reshaped our lives. The food arrived around 7, delivered by a college student who probably had no idea he was bringing sesame chicken to two women who just dismantled a decade of lies in a single day. We ate mostly in silence, both of us too emotionally exhausted for substantial conversation. Around 8:30, Mom's phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. She let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again, different number, then again and again. "Keith's calling from other phones," I said. "He knows you blocked him." Should I answer? Tell him to stop? No. Let Julian handle all communication. That's what we're paying him for. I took her phone and enabled the Do Not Disturb function, allowing calls only from numbers in her contact list. Anyone who needs to reach you legitimately can leave a message. Everything else is just noise. She nodded, staring at the blank screen. I keep thinking about all the times I could have seen it. The late nights, the distracted conversations. That time, I found a receipt for jewelry in his jacket pocket, and he said it was for a client's wife. She laughed bitterly. I actually believed him. I wanted to believe him so badly that I made myself stupid. You're not stupid, Mom. You trusted someone you made vows with. That's not weakness. That's what marriage is supposed to be. But you saw through him. You never trusted him. I never married him, I pointed out gently. I never had to build a life around the assumption that he was honest. And honestly, even I didn't know about the affair until a few months ago. I just knew something was wrong. The investigation was supposed to find out if he was hiding money, not if he was hiding a whole second life. She picked at her fried rice, not really eating. How long have you been planning this? 6 weeks of active investigation. But I've been watching him for years, Mom. The way he treated us, the way he made you smaller. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't prove it until the affair gave me a reason to look deeper. I should have protected you better, she whispered. I should have left him the first time he dismissed you. You did what you thought was right. He's a master manipulator. That's what made him successful in business. I squeezed her hand. But you're leaving now. That's what matters. My phone buzzed again, another text from Keith. Your mother will come to her senses. When she does, you'll be cut off completely. No trust fund, no inheritance, nothing. I'll make sure of it. I showed Mom the message. She took my phone and typed a response. The trust attorney has already frozen your access to all funds pending investigation. You can't take what you don't control anymore. Keith's response came immediately. Patricia, you'll regret this. Mom replied, the only thing I regret is 12 wasted years. Don't contact this number again. Then she blocked his number on my phone and her own. Over the next few days, the situation unfolded exactly as Julian had predicted. Keith was served with divorce papers on December 27th. The restraining order on accounts was granted on December 28th. By December 30th, Harrison Chen had completed his preliminary investigation and confirmed that Keith had misappropriated at least $600,000 from the family trust over the past 5 years, far more than the condo purchase alone. The forensic accountant Harrison brought in found additional irregularities. Keith had been billing personal expenses to the trust as family investments, including luxury vacations, his car payments, even some of Brianna's college tuition. The misappropriation had started small 3 years into the marriage and escalated dramatically over time. The total was estimated at over $800,000. On January 2nd, the local business journal ran a story about the investigation. Keith Morrison, prominent real estate developer, under investigation for trust fund misappropriation. Within hours, his business partners had released statements distancing themselves from him. 2 major projects were put on hold pending resolution of his legal issues. My phone buzzed with notifications throughout the day, news alerts, social media mentions, messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly curious about the family drama. By evening, my missed calls had climbed to 47, most from reporters and gossip-hungry acquaintances. I ignored them all. On January 3rd, Brianna called me, her voice stripped of its usual smugness. What you did to my father. What your father did to himself, I corrected. I just documented it. He's losing everything. His reputation, his business, his marriage. Are you happy now? I'm not happy about any of this, Brianna, but I'm relieved that my mother won't be funding his affair anymore. I'm relieved that he can't steal from Timothy's and my inheritance, and I'm at peace with the fact that actions have consequences. He pushed you in a chair once, and you destroyed his entire life over it. He pushed me to the ground after years of systematic cruelty. The investigation into his financial crimes would have happened eventually with or without me. I just accelerated the timeline. I paused. I sent you a warning email. Did you talk to a lawyer about protecting your interests? She was quiet for a moment. Yes. My attorney says I might be able to keep the trust fund Dad set up for me, but it depends on whether they can prove he used misappropriated money to fund it. Then you should hope the forensic accountant is thorough. If that money came from your father's legitimate business income, you'll be fine. If it came from my mother's trust, you'll have to return it. This is insane. You've turned my father into a criminal. Your father turned himself into a criminal when he stole money that wasn't his, Brianna. I just turned on the lights. She hung up without another word. By mid-January, Keith had been forced to move out of the estate as part of the divorce proceedings. The house was community property, but Mom had been granted exclusive use pending asset division. Keith moved into a modest apartment in Capitol Hill, a far cry from the luxury he'd grown accustomed to. The divorce itself was predictably ugly. Keith's attorney tried every tactic to minimize the financial settlement, but Julian was relentless. Every time Keith claimed poverty, Julian produced evidence of hidden assets or questionable business transactions. The trust investigation became a key component of the divorce proceedings, with the court ruling that Keith's misappropriation constituted both breach of fiduciary duty and financial misconduct that warranted punitive measures. In March, the forensic accountant completed his full report. Total misappropriation, $923,000. Keith had been systematically looting the family trust for nearly 5 years, far longer than anyone had initially suspected. The prosecutor's office decided to pursue criminal charges, theft, and embezzlement. Keith's attorney negotiated a plea deal, full restitution, 5 years probation, and permanent removal from any fiduciary capacity. He avoided prison, but his reputation was permanently destroyed. The divorce was finalized in June. Mom received the house, 70% of Keith's liquid assets, and a significant portion of his business holdings. Keith's company never recovered from the scandal. He was forced to sell it at a substantial loss to cover his restitution obligations. Brianna and I never spoke again after that January phone call. I heard through family channels that she'd moved to Portland and changed her last name. I couldn't blame her. Being Keith Morrison's daughter had become a liability. Timothy came home for the summer and found Mom transformed. She'd redecorated the house, removing all traces of Keith's aesthetic. She'd reconnected with old friends she'd let drift away during the marriage. She'd even started volunteering with a nonprofit that helped women leave financially abusive relationships. "You saved her," Timothy said one evening, while we sat on the patio where I'd read Wesley Garrett's report 6 months earlier. "I just showed her the truth. She saved herself by having the courage to leave." Still that night at Christmas dinner when he pushed me, Timothy admitted I wanted to punch him. "But you had a better plan, Stacy." I thought about that night, the cold floor, the shocked silence, the humiliation that had catalyzed everything that followed. In retrospect, Keith pushing me might have been the best thing he ever did for our family. It had given me the final push I needed to stop gathering evidence and start taking action. "Sometimes the best revenge isn't violence," I said softly. "It's just turning on the lights and letting everyone see who someone really is." Mom joined us on the patio with 3 glasses of lemonade. She looked younger now, lighter. The tension that had lived in her shoulders for 12 years had finally dissolved. "I got a call from Harrison Chen today," she said. "The trust has been restructured. You and Timothy are now the primary beneficiaries with me as trustee until you're both 35. Keith has no legal claim to any of it." "How much is left after the restitution?" Timothy asked. "With the recovered funds and the settlement from the divorce, about $2 million split between the 3 of us," Mom said. "Not the fortune Keith promised, but enough to give you both a real start." I thought about what that money represented. Not just financial security, but vindication. Proof that my father's legacy hadn't been completely squandered by a man who'd never respected it. "What are you going to do with your share?" Timothy asked me. "Honestly," I said, "I'm thinking about starting my own marketing firm. I've learned enough from Wesley Garrett about investigation and documentation. I think there might be a market for corporate investigation services combined with reputation management." Mom smiled. "Your father would be proud. He always said you had a gift for seeing through people's facades, Stacy." We sat there as the summer sun set over Seattle, 3 people who'd survived a decade of manipulation and emerged stronger. Keith Morrison was somewhere across the city rebuilding a diminished life from the ruins of his own arrogance. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't feel anything for him at all except perhaps a distant pity. He pushed me to the ground in front of our family because he thought I was powerless. He'd learned too late that documentation is more powerful than dominance, that truth is more devastating than violence, and that the daughter he dismissed for 12 years had been paying attention the entire time. That Christmas night, when I'd fallen to the floor and everyone had stared, in shocked silence, Keith Morrison had thought he'd won. He thought he'd put me in my place, reminded me that in his house, under his roof, I was nothing. He'd been wrong. The only thing he'd done was give me the motivation to finish what I'd already started. And by the time he woke up the next morning to 47 missed calls from attorneys, family members, and business associates, his life had already changed forever. He just hadn't realized it yet.